Hi Grant, I just thought I'd make you a quick tutorial on how to take this thing apart. It's your little Saeco machine from the shop. So first of all, I've took out, as you can imagine, some of these parts, you know, the water tank. Obviously there's two screws because there is also, I've already done this, there's also these with the two screws that sit inside it. So the water container came out first, then I've undone two screws which are labelled here and here. This panel, as you probably know, slides off then. So we'll keep that out of the way. Just want to make this process easy for you if you need to look at it again. Once this is done, there is a couple of tubes inside you'll probably see. So there's one here and one here. So these are going to have to be disconnected. Also then, we've got two screws at the back, which are also on a small Torx fitting. So these I'll sort of give a shake just to not get any water anywhere. So we're going to turn it slightly and undo the two screws located at the very bottom. Oh, you can't really see on camera, but they're just right at the very bottom underneath the power sockets. So I'll go and take those out now and remove the other part. It's good to have it on a corner. At least one of these screws are out. They come out very easily. I'm going to keep all the screws separate just so that the right screws go back in the right holes, partly because the plastic's not of the best quality, so we don't want to thread anything more than we have to. So if you can see now, this machine, I'm going to open the door to the side, which you'll hear there. This then lifts slightly from the bottom and unhooks from the top. Okay, so this is the entire hinged door area. I'm going to set this down too, just out of the way. Then what I've got is, that I find very useful for getting into this, I have like a micro socket set. I'll show you this in a second, which is basically this tiny little thing. And as you can see the size of my finger, it's minute. I'm going to take the same Torx bit, which is this. I'm going to put it in because there's two screws, or there's three screws should I say, that we need to access in order to help us. They're both located, I'm just going to make sure I can see that, one here, and if I twist it round, there's one up inside the front just there. So we're going to go ahead and take those out as well before we look at anything else that's causing some of these issues. I'm also just going to get a torch because, like with anything, it's a nightmare to see what you're doing. In fact, what I'll probably need is the extender on this. I'm not sure where that's come from. I'll probably need the extender on this just to get into where I need to be. Okay, so we can just get up now and take some of these. Once they're slightly loosened here, there, they can generally come out. They should be put back in sort of finger tight then. And that one's kind of near the front left. What I'll probably do now is continue by hand. Once these come out, we're not a million miles away from sorting this out. It's just a central screw that you already know about. That's one, two. Like I say, I will post this on YouTube and give you a link access to it later on. Here's another when it wants to come out. There we go. And then the last one is just under there, so just near to the edge. Bear in mind, don't take any of the others out because they hold what is a rail of three solenoids on, for water control. So, we should be somewhere close. This then, as you probably know, lifts. There's a little cable, set of cables there. Just rest it down, try not to tug on those too much. And then we're into the grinder assembly. Hopefully you can see this. I'm just going to enlarge a little bit, just so that you can see what I'm doing. So, first thing that needs to come off is this rubber cover. I've also been given these by Evoca, the manufacturer. I'm not entirely sure they're right. I did explain at the shop, but we're going to hope that it might be what's needed. So with this off, what we need to do is go back into it. Now, as you know, this central section here needs to come off, not the normal way. So it's got to go clockwise, which is usually what you do to tighten something, but it's how this thing comes off. So we're going to undo that carefully. This comes off. Now, please bear in mind, there is washers and a few other bits here as well. So that's come off. I'm going to set that aside and we're going to go in and retrieve the small washer that's on top, which is just there also. So there we go. So we're going to put all that back together so that the entire assembly stays together there. If you can see that washer as well. So that's just your beam guide. The other thing that we have to do is there's also 2 screws here, which you also need to take off. So once these come off, and there's a rubber fitting just underneath, so that pulls off, which is your adjustment. Once we've undone these, I would, at this point, which is what I'm going to do now, I'm going to make a mark where this sits. So I've got some red paint. I'll make a small mark on this. If you can still hear me, sorry, I'm moving away in the garage. So generally what I would do is, now there is a small red mark on this already. So my plan would be, one is put one, just a tiny one there and a tiny one, you know, where the silver meets the black. And also we're going to guide up here. So where that is and where that is. Let me pause and I'll come back in a sec with what I've done. Hope you can see those markings. You can see just a small one sort of just there, and I've sort of guided up there as well. Okay, we're back, Grant, with what hopefully will be the last stage of this. I'm going to try and keep that and try and keep my hands out of the way. So as I was saying, you'll need to take off, I've just dried the paint really, the markers that I put on, so you need to take out these 2 retaining screws, which really are just for this sort of lever adjustment on top of the grinder. It's also red hot now because I've just dried it off. So those 2 aside, you're now into the main part of the grinder. So what happens is this will now need to twist to match up a certain marking to be able to get it out. So the hope is, the outer wheel, should I say, should match up to get this out to about there, I think, and hopefully on one of these markings, I have to keep twisting it, I think, in fact maybe the other way. If you just tug it a little bit as you're doing it, we should get to a point, there we go, see how it comes out at a certain point. So there's just basically a marking. We'll then have to, once it goes back in, reset it. So I don't want to move this. Now as you can see, there's a lot of oil, and in fact there's a lot of moisture in here which has clogged this up. Can you see some of that and see the oil and the shininess? I'm not entirely sure, it's the first time I've seen this. So we're going to hoover this off. I'm also going to set that aside and dry that in a second. If I can just take you over, I'll also show you what is inside here. This isn't great, and it's another design flaw, unfortunately. All that moisture, and I don't know whether you can see, but that shouldn't be that wet. The issue is we're going to have to try and get all that out, clean it out, because this is where the sparks happen. You'll probably see that most of that's clean. What I probably need to do is just lift you a little higher to see if I can get this a little way in. We're going to try and resolve this issue if we can. So underneath this burr set, bear in mind this is your top burr grinder adjustment with all the teeth in it. So that's going to have to be cleaned out and dried. This bottom one is also, but if you lift it up, there will be some balls underneath it, which is basically your bearings for this. Now, as you can see, 2 of them have come out. You can see that. We need to take these out carefully, and we cannot lose these. So I'm going to place them in this little tray, because we're going to have to clean all this out. One of them has stayed inside. Also, what you need to be aware of is that there is like a plate in here as well, and there's 3 springs. So whilst I'm going to try and take this out, I also need to take these 3 springs out as well, which are in there. Now, I've never usually had to do this, but it's quite gummed up. What they've actually sent me is this to correct the problem. As you will see inside, it already exists. There's one literally just below it. So I can't see how this is going to fix the issue, but I just wanted to make you aware so that you can see that it's 100% a manufacturing issue. I'm going to brush and clean this. And I'll come back to you with the 3rd section of the video, rebuilding. I don't know if you can see that. From within the chute, that's where the coffee goes. It leaves and goes in there and out through into the brew chamber, which ends up inside your brew unit here. Sorry for the shakiness of this video, but I'm just trying to get as much out of it as I can. So I'm just going to hoover some of this out. This coffee is extremely wet. I'm not sure whose coffee it is, but I'm just being ultra mindful that I don't want to suck anything up that I shouldn't be. We're also going to brush this off. This is your guide where your springs and bearings sit. As you can see, it's absolutely caked in coffee. This coffee's wet through, so I'm not sure if you tried to clean it with moisture. If it has been cleaned with moisture, maybe this entirely at one person. If it has been cleaned with moisture, excuse that sound, then I would imagine that's some of the cause with this. So we're going to fit this back in. There is some small rubber fittings in here, which we're just going to try and push back in place. You can try and see them in a second. I'll show you just so that we can. There's some small rubber fittings in there, those grey fittings. So they need to stay in place while we do this. Hopefully you're still on track there. So you will see there's a shape. Oh, I want to get it in the camera, sorry. There's a shape there, so obviously that needs to sit in where it needs to fit. And at the moment it's not seeming to want to go in. So this is the slightly painful thing of doing this. So we've just got to get this lined up as best as we can. This is definitely a tad tricky to get in. The thing I can use on this, and again sparingly, it's a food safe grease, the tiniest amount just to help guide it in. I'm sure this isn't the nice thing, but I'm just going to use as little as I can because we don't want anything sticking to this either. Thankfully it is underneath the main grind mechanism on this. Just going to make sure they're all seated again. That seemed to fit in a little better, I think. We're going to test it by putting one of the springs in, see where the springs sit. If the springs sit too low, yeah, that's not in. Okay, so we just need to have another go at this because these little parts just keep moving. Be as patient as we can. I'm going to come back to you in a second once I've figured this out. Hi Grant, right, we're back on. We're in place. I'm just going to load the springs back into the holes, which I'll show you in a second. I'll load the bearings back on. I'm going to put the bearings in just because I don't want these to move just yet, and they are a little bit finicky. This is basically just the guide bearings for the bottom burr. These sit just on top of each of the springs, just to give it a little bit of a... So we're going to put those in. We're then going to brush off, when I find my brush, there we go. I'm going to brush off this burr. This needs to be dry. At the moment, for what is only a month of use, this isn't going to come off just with that. So I'm going to take this and the other one. As you can see, it's absolutely caked. If you can, there we go. Just absolutely caked in grease. I'm going to go and clean the other one too. Back in a minute. Okay, we're going to try for reassembly. I've cleaned off this about as best as I can. It's absolutely caked. Hi, we're back for reassembly. I've heated these up just to make sure they're bone dry when they go back in. So we're going to insert that. What I've also done is, I'm not sure if you can see, I've put in another foam ring now. I'm not sure this is going to help because the fundamental flaw on these machines that is not supported by the manufacturer is all the coffee clogs up in between all these little channels. So rather than going out through the chute down here, it just clogs up and clogs up. The level gets high, the beans can't drop in to where this burr sits. So if we put this back in now, there, my hope is this will keep some of it out. I'm unsure that it will, but we're going to give it a whirl. As we took it apart last time, this will drop in here just nicely, then this will turn to match where we were last time. So I think this was possibly in the wrong way. There. Let's line that up. I think for us, this is possibly in this way. And then we're going to line that back up to try and find out where we were. Let's look at the locating pins that I put in last time. It really should be there. Let's have a quick look on here, see where we are. So I think those are the two screw holes. What I'm inclined to do now is move this and readjust this so that it can't go quite as fine and hopefully clog up quite as often as it did, but hopefully this will help eliminate some of this. What I'm going to do is, where the adjustment, you've got a very fine adjustment across here. Can you see it on the camera? Once the peg's back on, usually this would sit somewhere like, I'm going to turn this by hand. Let's put this back on, let's see where we are. So somewhere like this, there, I think was your finest it would go. Now my view would be, is going to lift it, make it slightly coarser by 1 notch, and then reattach this because we don't want it to go quite as fine as it did before. So we're going to utilize some different screw holes now before we put the screws back in. Hope that makes sense. Just to stop it being as fine as it once was. We don't want it to get that fine again. So that's where it was. That's at the absolute finest, I think. Let's just have a quick look. So we're going to move this back 2 notches. I'm going to move this right up. Let's see if we can't get this somewhere just a little finer, a little coarser, should I say, on the finest setting. So there we go. So we're going to line those up with those two, and we're going to put the screws back in. Once we've done this, we're going to put the central locator in for the grinder. These are going to fight you a little bit when they first go in, but as long as they're going in, we're not going to over tighten these either. This one should go in exactly the same way. And then it's just the rest of the reassembly in the hope that we've fixed this machine. Time will tell. Hopefully it will give you less trouble going forward, especially with that ring, that extra felt ring. So this is in. Your locator is now on, which means with your adjustment back on, which is your rubber part, you can't go quite as fine as it used to. I know that's not usually ideal with espresso machines, but at least now you've got a little less adjustment. Please don't forget to put this back on. First of all though, as promised, we're going to put the central bit back on. So the screw goes in. Remember, it tightens the opposite way around. So anti-clockwise to tighten this. Obviously only really just beyond finger tight. There we go. So that should be fine. I'm just going to give it a tiny bit of a loosen. Okay. Right, now for reassembly. So obviously I'm going to swap screwdrivers back to the small socket just to get everything back together. We're going to put your rubber housing on, which just sits on these 4 locators over the 4 here. Really just acts as a guide. Again, let's make sure, swipe it down, make sure that's dry. I'm also going to run the hairdryer just quickly over it. Because we want everything as bone dry as we possibly can. Okay, back to the rest of the reassembly. First of all, this comes on. Now this hooks in just underneath. There's a small ridge that you probably can't see here that hooks into this front panel. So it's a little tricky to get on, to be honest. There we go. Once it snaps into place, we should be okay. So the plan is we're going to bring this down and we're going to start putting the screws back in. Again, these are a little tricky, but I'd just say, not that I'm overly patient, but just be patient, you'll get them back in. I don't actually think that's located. It's not located back in here. It's just to try and get this thing lined up is a little tricky. There we go, and there is, yeah, there's a small locator at the back here as well. So there's like a little notch just at the back of it, if you can see that, or you'll see it when you if you ever take this apart. So I'm going to get one in there. I'm going to try and put this in finger tight. There we go. Keep it from moving around, so make sure none of the cables for the grinder are in the way. So we'll put the other two back in, so there's 3 in total. There we go, there's the other one. Put these back in. I'll tighten them all when I'm finished, and then reassembly for the rest is really straightforward. Just going to take the torch, because like I say, it's a little dark under here. My eyesight is failing the older I get. See what you think. So with that on, let's put this onto the opposite ratchet. Let's tighten it. Yeah, literally just barely tight. Bear in mind that like I say, the plastic on these is fairly fragile. If we can get this back in the hole it was in, there we go. So again, just a little nick up, not much more than that. Same with this one. There we go. So tighten, tighten, tighten. Yeah, it's literally just beyond finger tight. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Lovely. We finished with that ratchet. A little socket driver. Put it all away. Keep everything clean. Then reassemble it. Back to the shop, all within 1 hour. Don't forget rear pipes. If you can see these. In fact, I realise I've been on Zoom. If you can see these, I'm sorry. As I've put on, I've inserted all the other screws around here, here, and one at the front after clicking it back in. Don't forget, pipe at the back. There's only one place for it to go. Same with the pipe at the front. Please don't forget these, because it will flood all the electrics and board if they're not on securely. Last couple of things to do. We've got 2 screws here, which I believe are for the rear panel, so we're going to do that first. So the rear panel, literally, if you hang the machine over the edge of something, you can literally just hook this on. If you can see that, just hooks on at the back first, then generally it will close, and if it closes, we're kind of in, and then it's just the screws at the bottom, followed by the side panel. So there's basically 6 more screws to put in, I believe. So well, the bottom ones, again, hardly tight at all, bearing in mind that these are easy to over tighten, should I say. We have a side panel to put on, so let's do that now. Again, this hooks and then pushes in, or should I say, no, sorry, my mistake. This slides and slides down. This one slightly different than the other, but as long as it looks flush, that's fine. We have the 2 screws for this, which go in at the top. Hopefully you can still see all this. Yeah, that's great. So I will put this onto a YouTube later on for you, and then you'll have access to it on our channel, which we're going to try and share a lot more content on. So last but not least, the beam guide goes on. Should all sit flush. You've got these 2. Again, these are slightly threaded already on this machine because of the brittle nature and the cheap construction of it, unfortunately. Apologies if I'm not mincing my words, but we've had so much trouble from the manufacturer with these machines. I've unfortunately lost a little patience with these. My advice would be to anyone looking at a small beam to cut machine, spend as much as you can afford. These are notoriously cheap. This may cause me some headaches with the manufacturer, but I'll always go with something like the WMF 950, which you can get through us at Mini&Mighty, for probably near to about, well, I think we're currently doing it at if you're buying coffee from us, at 2,350 plus VAT. That'll get you some way towards a warranty as well for the first year and installation. So get in touch if you need anything like that. We also do a range of very small machines from Bravalor. But as I've said, the ones branded Saeco, the Royals especially, I wouldn't entertain. That's just my opinion. Thanks so much. See you next time.